The sky above the dense forest was dotted with clouds, and the air felt heavy with moisture. Jackson, a human soldier on a mission far from home, pushed through the thick underbrush, his boots sinking into the damp earth. His task was simple: survey the area, gather intelligence, and make sure nothing unusual was happening. Yet, in a place like this, on a distant world, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Jackson had been on missions before, but something about this planet felt different. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, and the trees around him stood tall, their twisted branches reaching for the sky like ancient sentinels. He had been walking for hours, navigating the dense foliage, when something caught his eye. A flicker of movement. A sound like the rustling of leaves, but out of place. He stopped, instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side. His fingers wrapped around the cool metal handle, and he crouched low, scanning the area. His heart rate quickened, a soldier's instinct kicking in. There was someone, or something, out there. The forest had been silent, but now, the tension in the air was palpable. Slowly, cautiously, Jackson moved toward the sound. He pushed through a thicket of bushes, stepping lightly, trying not to make a sound. As he rounded the corner of a massive tree, he saw her, an alien woman, crouching in the shadows. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall and slender, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her long, silvery hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. Her large eyes, a striking shade of purple, glowed faintly in the twilight, and her pointed ears stuck out slightly, giving her a unique, almost ethereal appearance. She was crouched down, her back to him, but she seemed to sense him immediately. Her head snapped up, and their eyes locked. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, neither of them moved. The forest around them fell silent, as if the very world was holding its breath. Who are you?" Jackson asked, his voice steady despite the surprise of the moment. He kept his hand on his weapon, but he didn't point it at her. His training taught him not to shoot first unless absolutely necessary. The alien woman blinked, her expression unreadable. She didn't answer immediately, instead studying him with curiosity. Her eyes flickered over his uniform, then back to his face. Jackson had seen enough to know when someone was sizing him up, but there was something different in the way she looked at him. It wasn't hostile. It was more like a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I am Elira," she said softly, her voice like the sound of a gentle breeze. Her accent was unlike anything Jackson had heard before, but the words were clear enough. Jackson raised an eyebrow, lowering his weapon just a little. "Elira," he repeated, the name rolling off his tongue. "What are you doing here? This is a restricted area." Elira stood up slowly, her tall frame almost seeming to glide as she did. She didn't seem threatened, but Jackson wasn't sure whether that was a sign of bravery or ignorance. I got lost," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around, as if unsure of her next move. "I was searching for something. I didn't mean to intrude." Jackson frowned, studying her carefully. "You didn't mean to intrude. Who are you really? And what are you searching for?" Her eyes softened, but there was a fleeting moment of hesitation before she spoke again. "I'm not from here. I come from a place far away. I was sent to observe. But I never thought I would meet a human like you." The words stung Jackson more than he expected. "A spy?" he asked, his voice hardening. He didn't move his hand from his blaster, but he didn't raise it either. Elira's gaze dropped to the ground for a brief moment, her expression pained. "Yes, a spy," she whispered, confirming his suspicion. "But I never intended to harm anyone. I was only supposed to watch and learn." Jackson's mind raced. A spy. She had been sent to spy on Earth, on humans. His mission had been clear: to find and eliminate any threat to the human race. But this wasn't what he expected. He had always been taught that aliens were the enemy, that their kind was here to destroy humanity. Yet there was something about Elira that didn't fit with the usual narrative. "You're not what I expected," Jackson muttered under his breath, lowering his weapon completely now. He wasn't sure why, but he felt that he didn't need to point it at her anymore. There was something in the way she looked at him, almost like a plea for understanding. "I never wanted to be part of this," Elira confessed, her voice barely audible. "But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know where else to go." Jackson paused. She was still an alien, still a spy, but her words stirred something in him. He had seen the way her eyes shone, with confusion, fear, and something else. Something human. "Listen," Jackson said, his tone softer now. "I don't know what your mission is, but you can't stay here alone. You're not safe." Elira nodded slowly, the faintest trace of relief crossing her face. "Then, will you help me?" she asked quietly, her eyes meeting his once more. Jackson looked at her for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He didn't know what this alien woman wanted, or why she had approached him. But in that moment, he realized he had no choice. He couldn't turn his back on her. Not yet. "All right," Jackson said, his voice steady. "But you need to trust me. I'll help you. But we need to get out of here." Elira's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to agree. She nodded silently, and for the first time, she seemed to let her guard down. Together, they turned and walked deeper into the forest, a human soldier and an alien spy, now bound by an uncertain alliance. The forest around them seemed to grow quieter as Jackson and Elira made their way deeper into the unknown. The thick trees and dense underbrush gave the place an eerie feel, yet Elira seemed at ease, moving gracefully with her alien speed. Jackson kept pace, still unsure what to make of the situation. He had never been in a scenario like this before, not with an alien, and especially not one who had admitted to being a spy. Elira had been quiet for a while, her steps light on the forest floor. Jackson glanced at her every so often. She didn't look like the kind of person, or alien, that would betray anyone. There was something about her that seemed almost human. He shook his head, trying to push aside the strange thoughts that were creeping into his mind. After a few minutes, they reached a small clearing. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow on the ground. Elira finally stopped, turning to face Jackson. Her large purple eyes were steady, but there was something in them, a vulnerability that made Jackson pause. "You said you were a spy," Jackson began, breaking the silence. "But you're not acting like one. Spies don't show up like this, admitting everything right away." Elira's expression shifted slightly, her eyes lowering to the ground. "I never wanted to be a spy," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of regret. "I was chosen for this mission because of my skills. I was trained to observe, to blend in. But when I came to this planet, things started to change." Jackson raised an eyebrow. His curiosity piqued. "Change how?" he asked, his tone gentle. Despite everything, he found himself genuinely wanting to understand her. Elira hesitated, biting her lip as if searching for the right words. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice quieter than before. "I began to feel things. Things I wasn't supposed to feel. I saw the way humans live, how you fight for each other, how you care for your own. I wasn't expecting that. We were taught to think of you all as weak. But now, after everything I've seen, I'm not sure I can believe that anymore." Jackson frowned, taking in her words. "So, what? You came here to watch us, but now you're changing your mind." Elira's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jackson noticed the sadness in them. "I don't know. I was supposed to gather information, to learn your weaknesses, but I've seen your strength, your compassion, and I can't reconcile it with the mission I was given." Her words hung in the air between them, and Jackson felt the weight of them settle on his chest. A part of him didn't want to believe it. He had been taught to see aliens as enemies, as invaders who would stop at nothing to destroy humanity. But Elira wasn't what he had expected. She didn't fit the mold of the cold, calculating enemy. She was conflicted, just like him. "So, what are you going to do now?" Jackson asked, crossing his arms over his chest. He was still on edge, but the tension was different now. Elira wasn't just an alien spy anymore. She was a person. Someone struggling with her choices. Elira looked down, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her own decisions was too much to bear. "I don't know. I thought I was here to complete a mission. But now, I don't know what to think anymore. I'm afraid I've already made a mistake." Jackson took a step closer to her, his voice softer now. "You can't undo what you've done, but you don't have to make it worse." Elira raised her head, meeting his gaze. "What if it's too late? What if I can't undo the damage I've already caused?" Jackson shook his head, trying to reassure her. "You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next." Elira's lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She seemed to be lost in her thoughts, her mind racing as she grappled with everything she had just confessed. Jackson could see the internal battle she was fighting, the conflict in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she had done the right thing by revealing her true nature to him, but there was a part of her that seemed to trust him, even if she couldn't fully trust herself. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Elira spoke again, her voice filled with emotion. "I never thought I would get so close to anyone. I was never supposed to care, but after everything I've seen, I can't ignore how I feel. And now, I don't know how to undo what I've done." Jackson's heart softened. He knew what it was like to feel trapped by your own actions, to wonder if you could ever make things right. He had been in situations before where he had to choose between his duty and his conscience. But this was different. Elira was different. "You don't have to undo anything," Jackson said, his voice steady. "You're here now. You have a choice. You can still make things right, in your own way." Elira looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. You would help me?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and hope. Jackson nodded slowly. "I don't know what your mission was, or how this is all going to end, but I can't just walk away. You're not just a spy. You're someone who made a choice, just like I do every day. And maybe we can figure this out together." A small smile tugged at the corners of Elira's lips, but it was a sad smile, filled with uncertainty. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time since she arrived on Earth, she felt like she wasn't entirely alone. Jackson took a deep breath. "Let's just get out of here. We'll figure it out as we go." Elira nodded, still processing everything she had just shared. But there was a spark of hope in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to face it. The journey through the dense forest was slow, as the path was narrow and difficult to navigate. Jackson and Elira walked side by side, both silent for a while. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable, but the tension that had hung in the air before seemed to have shifted. Jackson wasn't sure what to think of Elira anymore. She was still an alien, a spy sent to Earth to observe his people. But somehow she didn't feel like an enemy. Elira moved gracefully through the underbrush, her alien nature evident in the way she seemed to blend with the forest. Her steps were light and almost soundless, while Jackson's were heavier, less practiced in this kind of environment. He had been trained for combat and survival, not for the quiet stillness of an alien forest. Yet he couldn't help but feel that Elira was somehow at home here, as if she had lived in places like this before. "So, where exactly are we headed?" Jackson asked, breaking the silence. He had been following Elira for a while now, trusting her to lead the way, but he wasn't sure where they were going. Elira glanced at him, her purple eyes bright in the dim light of the forest. "We need to find shelter. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it becomes. I don't want to risk encountering the others before we're ready." Jackson nodded. He knew that the longer they stayed in the open, the more likely they were to be found by the other aliens who might be searching for Elira. He didn't fully trust her yet, but he was starting to understand her more. The feeling of connection between them was growing, even if it was difficult to explain. He hadn't expected to be in this situation, walking through an alien forest with a spy he was supposed to capture or kill. But now he found himself wondering if there was more to this than just a mission. The silence stretched between them once more, but this time it was comfortable. They were both thinking, reflecting on what had happened and what was to come. Jackson couldn't help but notice how Elira seemed different from the others he had encountered. She wasn't like the cold, calculating alien forces he had been taught to fear. Elira had emotions, doubts, and fears. It made her seem more human. "Elira," Jackson said after a while, his voice soft, "why didn't you try to stop the mission? You could have left, gone back to your people." Elira stopped walking for a moment, and Jackson followed suit. She turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "I couldn't just walk away from it. My people, they would never forgive me. I was trained for this from the moment I was born. But after seeing what I've seen here, after meeting you, I can't just ignore everything I've learned." Jackson frowned, trying to understand. "So, you're telling me you didn't have a choice?" Elira shook her head slowly. "Not really. I was raised to believe that humans were dangerous, that we had to watch you closely. But now, I see that the situation is more complicated. I see the way you fight for each other. I see how you protect the ones you love, even at the cost of your own safety. It's different than what I was told." Jackson's heart softened as he listened to her words. It wasn't just her mission that had been difficult. It was her own beliefs, the things she had been taught to believe about humans. It wasn't easy to change your mind about something so deeply ingrained in you. He could see that Elira was struggling with it, and that struggle made her seem more real, more human than she had at first. "Everyone has a choice," Jackson said after a moment. "You might not have chosen this mission, but you've got a choice now. You don't have to follow what you were taught. You can decide what kind of person, or alien, you want to be." Elira looked at him, her purple eyes reflecting the moonlight as she considered his words. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort of calming herself. "I want to believe that. I want to believe that I can make a choice that's different from what I've always known." Jackson didn't know what else to say. He had never been in a position like this before. He had fought in battles, faced danger, but never had he been asked to choose between duty and compassion. It was a complicated feeling, one he hadn't expected to find on this mission, and it made him feel uncertain. He had always trusted his training, his instincts, but now, those instincts were telling him to trust Elira, to help her. "You're not alone in this," Jackson said, his voice firm, as if he were trying to reassure himself as much as her. "I'll help you. We'll figure it out together." Elira's lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, Jackson could see the weight of her emotions in her eyes, the confusion, the fear, and something else. It was a mix of relief and gratitude, something she had likely never felt before. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what will happen next, but thank you for helping me." Jackson nodded, his gaze steady. "We're in this together now. We take it one step at a time." As they continued walking through the forest, the connection between them deepened. There was still so much uncertainty ahead, but for the first time, Elira didn't feel as alone. And for Jackson, the line between enemy and ally blurred. They were two people, two beings, caught in a situation neither of them had expected, but somehow they were beginning to understand each other in a way they never thought possible. As Jackson and Elira walked through the dense forest, the path became more treacherous. The trees grew closer together, their twisted branches casting shadows that seemed to stretch forever. The air felt thicker now, and the silence around them seemed even more oppressive. Jackson could feel his senses on high alert, his mind constantly scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. But the forest remained eerily quiet, as though it was hiding something just beyond the trees. Elira, on the other hand, appeared calm, almost too calm. Her pace never faltered, her eyes never left the path ahead. Jackson couldn't help but notice how natural she seemed in this environment. It was as if she had lived here her entire life, and despite the growing tension, he found himself starting to trust her more with each passing moment. She wasn't just an alien spy anymore. She was someone who understood this place, who knew how to survive. "So," Jackson began, his voice cutting through the silence, "we're heading to some kind of shelter, right?" Elira glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Yes, it's not far now. I know a place where we can hide, where we'll be safe, for now." "Safe from what?" Jackson asked, his brow furrowing. "I thought the danger was over." Elira didn't answer immediately. She kept walking, her steps light and measured. Jackson could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her posture had shifted ever so slightly. She was on edge, and he couldn't ignore it. "We're not safe yet," Elira finally said, her voice low. "There are others who will be looking for me. My people won't stop until they find me." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. He had known there was more to Elira's story, but hearing it out loud made everything feel more real. They weren't just running from some distant threat. They were running from Elira's own people, the very people who had sent her to Earth in the first place. "Your people?" Jackson asked, his voice tight with concern. "What are they going to do when they find you?" Elira's eyes hardened, and for a moment, Jackson saw a flicker of something cold in her gaze. "They won't be kind," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "They will want to make an example of me. I broke their rules. I betrayed them." Jackson's thoughts raced. He had known the mission wasn't as simple as it seemed, but this was more complicated than he had expected. Elira wasn't just an outsider. She was a traitor to her own kind. The people who had trained her, who had sent her to spy on Earth, would stop at nothing to reclaim her. They continued walking, and Jackson could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were running from danger, danger that was hunting them, just as much as Elira had once hunted humans. But now, everything was different. Now, they were both running together. Suddenly, Elira stopped in her tracks. Jackson almost bumped into her, but he quickly pulled back, his hand instinctively going to his blaster. "Did you hear that?" Elira whispered, her voice sharp. Jackson froze, his eyes scanning the shadows. The forest was still. Too still. "I don't hear anything," Jackson said, his hand tightening on the blaster. Elira motioned for him to stay quiet, her eyes narrowing. "It's coming from behind us." Jackson turned his head, his instincts telling him to move, but Elira's hand shot out, stopping him. "No," she said, her voice firm. "We wait. We need to be sure." Jackson had no choice but to trust her. He had no idea what they were facing, but Elira seemed to know more than he did. They stood there, perfectly still, as the sound grew louder. It was the faint crunching of leaves, the soft but deliberate footfalls of someone, or something, moving through the forest. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. Whoever, or whatever, it was getting closer. Elira's eyes darted from side to side, her posture tense. Jackson could see her preparing for something, though he wasn't sure what. She wasn't panicking, but there was a sense of urgency in her movements. The footsteps grew louder, and Jackson felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Whoever was following them wasn't trying to hide. They were getting closer, and they were moving fast. Then, out of nowhere, a figure stepped out from behind a tree. It was another alien, tall, armored, and imposing. His skin was a deep shade of green, and his eyes glowed with a fierce intensity. He held a weapon in his hand, a weapon that Jackson didn't recognize, but he knew it wasn't anything good. The alien's eyes locked onto Elira, and for a brief moment, Jackson saw a flicker of recognition in the other's gaze. It was as if the two shared some unspoken history. "Elira," the alien growled, his voice like gravel. "You can't run forever. Elira didn't flinch. Her expression remained stoic, but Jackson could see the tension in her jaw. She was ready to fight. "We don't have to do this," Elira said, her voice calm but firm. "You can leave. Let me go." The alien took a step forward, his weapon aimed directly at Elira. "No, you belong to us. You've broken the rules. You'll pay for this." Jackson's hand flew to his blaster, his heart racing. He didn't know who this alien was, but he wasn't about to let anyone hurt Elira. She had trusted him, and he wasn't going to let her down. "Get behind me," Jackson ordered, his voice low and commanding. Elira hesitated for just a moment, then stepped back, positioning herself behind Jackson. The alien didn't seem fazed by the human's presence, but his eyes flickered with something that resembled curiosity. "You're protecting her," the alien sneered. "A human, protecting a traitor. You're just as weak as she is." Jackson didn't respond. He was already moving, his blaster aimed at the alien's chest. He didn't know if his shot would land, but he wasn't going to wait for the alien to fire first. The tension in the air was thick, and the forest around them seemed to hold its breath. In this moment, Jackson knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. The alien threat had found them, and they were far from safe. The alien stood motionless, his cold eyes fixed on Jackson as he lowered his weapon slightly. Elira's heart raced behind him, and Jackson could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy. The alien's stance remained threatening, and his grip on the weapon was firm. "Don't you understand?" the alien growled. "You've broken our laws. You're a traitor, Elira. You have no place here anymore." Elira's voice was calm, but filled with sorrow. "I didn't choose this path," she said, stepping slightly forward. "I didn't want to betray anyone, but I can't go back. Not after everything I've seen." Jackson couldn't help but glance over his shoulder at her. He could feel the weight of her words, and despite the danger surrounding them, his heart went out to her. She had made a choice, one that had cost her everything. Now she was trying to make sense of the emotions and doubts that had caused her to turn away from her mission. The alien scoffed, clearly unimpressed by her words. "You think they'll forgive you. You think you can just walk away from your duty. You're deluded, Elira. You've chosen your fate, and it's one of punishment." Elira's face tightened, as if the alien's words stung. Jackson could see her struggling to remain calm, to stay in control. But he could also see the inner conflict in her eyes, the guilt, the doubt. She wasn't just fighting against the alien in front of her. She was fighting against herself, against everything she had been trained to believe. Jackson could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The alien before them wasn't just a soldier or a hunter. He was a representation of Elira's past, of everything she had been taught to believe. And now, Elira was standing against it, unsure of what she had become. "I don't need forgiveness," Elira said, her voice shaking slightly. "I need to make this right. I'm not the person I was when I first came to Earth." The alien's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He took a step forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied Elira closely. "And you think you can do that by hiding with this human?" His voice was laced with contempt. "This weak human who can't even defend himself properly." Jackson's grip tightened on his blaster, but he didn't raise it. Instead, he stood tall, stepping forward just a bit, trying to project calm even as his heart raced. "You don't know anything about me," Jackson said, his voice steady. "I fought battles you couldn't even imagine, and I'm not letting you hurt her." The alien's gaze flickered to Jackson, his eyes burning with disdain. "You think you can protect her? You're nothing but a distraction. Elira belongs to us, to our people. You don't understand the consequences of harboring a traitor." Jackson's mind raced, but his stance didn't waver. He had never been the kind of person who backed down from a challenge, and right now, Elira needed him more than ever. She was torn between two worlds, her past and the uncertain future she was trying to carve for herself. and he wasn't about to let anyone take that from her. Elira's voice interrupted the growing tension. "Please, stop. There doesn't have to be any more fighting. I just want to leave. I want to be free." The alien took another step forward, his weapon now fully aimed at Jackson. "You want to be free?" he mocked. "You can never be free. You chose to turn your back on us. You chose to abandon everything we've worked for." Elira's face hardened, her fists clenched at her sides. Jackson could see the conflict raging inside her. She wasn't just fighting for her own freedom. She was fighting against everything she had ever been taught, against the loyalty to her people that had been drilled into her since birth. Jackson could feel the weight of her struggle, but he couldn't let this alien intimidate her. Elira needed to make her own choice, but in that moment, Jackson knew he had to give her the space to do so. He couldn't force her to pick a side, but he could be there for her when the moment came. "You don't have to do this," Jackson said, his voice firm. "You don't owe him anything." Elira looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. For a brief moment, Jackson saw a crack in her armor, the deep pain she had been hiding. He wasn't sure if it was fear of the alien, fear of the consequences, or fear of what would happen if she made the wrong choice. "I'm not afraid of you," Elira said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I'm not afraid of what you think I owe. I've spent too long living in fear, living by rules that aren't mine to follow. I've made my choice." For the first time, the alien seemed to hesitate. His weapon wavered slightly, and his expression shifted from one of cold determination to something closer to doubt. Elira's words had struck a chord with him, though he didn't want to admit it. "You've made your choice?" the alien asked, his voice dark with disbelief. "I have," Elira replied, standing tall and facing him directly. "And I'm done running from it." Jackson couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell in his chest. Elira wasn't just choosing to stand up for herself. She was choosing a future that was hers to create, not one that had been forced upon her. And in that moment, he realized how much she had changed since they first met in the forest. She wasn't just a spy anymore. She was someone who had fought for her freedom. The alien sneered, but the anger in his eyes seemed to lessen. "You think you can escape this?" he asked, his voice cold. "I don't need to escape," Elira said, her voice unwavering. "I need to move forward." With that, the alien hesitated, his expression softening for just a moment before he stepped back, lowering his weapon. He didn't leave, but for the first time, there was doubt in his eyes. Jackson and Elira stood together, the weight of the moment settling between them. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, Elira had made her decision, and Jackson was there to stand with her. The alien stood there for a moment, silent, as if weighing Elira's words against his own mission. Jackson could sense the tension still hanging thick in the air. The standoff wasn't over. The alien's weapon was lowered, but the threat wasn't gone. They were still in danger, but something in Elira's eyes had changed. She was no longer hiding behind fear. She had decided to face what came next, even if it meant standing alone. Jackson couldn't help but feel a growing respect for her. He had seen her struggle, seen her question everything she knew, and yet she had found the courage to stand up for herself. He had always been the kind of person who relied on his training, his instincts. But now, as he looked at Elira, he realized that maybe, sometimes, it wasn't just about strength. It was about the courage to make the hard choices and stick by them. The alien, still holding his weapon, eyed Elira closely. "You don't understand what you're up against," he said, his voice low. "You think you can just walk away from everything. You'll never escape the consequences." Elira didn't flinch. "I've already made my choice, and I'm not afraid of the consequences anymore." Jackson stood beside her, silent but ready. His fingers itched at the handle of his blaster, but he didn't raise it. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew that if a fight broke out, he'd protect Elira. He owed her that much after everything she had shown him. The alien took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. You may not be afraid, but you should be. He looked at Jackson then, his gaze cold and calculating. You're making a mistake, human. This is not just a matter of loyalty. It's a matter of survival. Elira stepped forward, her posture strong but calm. Then I'll face it, she said. On my own terms, not on theirs. Jackson watched as the alien seemed to hesitate. There was no anger in Elira's voice, no pleading. She was firm, resolute. And for a moment, the alien seemed to falter. His weapon was still in his hands, but his gaze shifted from Elira to Jackson, and back again. The uncertainty in his eyes was something Jackson hadn't expected. This alien wasn't the emotionless soldier he had imagined. Maybe you don't understand, the alien said, his voice quieter now, more reflective. I was sent to bring you back. My orders were clear. I can't just ignore them. Elira's expression softened just slightly, but she didn't back down. I understand, but I'm not going back. I'm not part of that world anymore. I can't live in the shadows of the people who would use me like a weapon. The alien stood still for a long moment, his eyes flicking between her and Jackson. The silence stretched on, thick with tension, but also with something else, something that resembled doubt. Jackson shifted his weight, feeling the pressure of the moment. He wasn't a diplomat or a negotiator, but he had learned one thing in his life as a soldier. Sometimes, the hardest thing was making a choice. Sometimes, you didn't have all the answers, but you had to decide what you believed in. He could see Elira's struggle, but he could also see the strength she had found in herself. And in that moment, Jackson knew what he had to do. You have a choice too, Jackson said, his voice steady. The alien turned his cold gaze back to him. You can walk away. You don't have to follow through with your orders. The alien scoffed, but there was no conviction in the sound. And what would that accomplish, human? Letting her go. You think that's going to end well for either of you? Jackson didn't waver. I think we have a better chance of surviving if we don't keep fighting each other. We're all just trying to figure things out. But if you keep following her, threatening her, you're only making it worse. The alien was silent again, his eyes narrowed in thought. It was clear he was caught between his orders and something else, something he hadn't expected to find in this human and this alien woman. There was something about the way Jackson stood beside Elira, ready to face whatever came their way, that made the alien pause. Elira's voice broke the silence. You can go back. You can tell them I'm gone. You don't have to be part of this anymore. The alien's face remained stoic, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that might have been regret. Finally, he lowered his weapon completely, but his posture remained tense. I can't just walk away. Not like this. Jackson took a step forward, his voice low and calm. Then don't. Do what you have to do. But if you want to leave us alone, we'll give you a chance to walk away too. We're not your enemies. The alien seemed to struggle with this idea. For a moment, Jackson wondered if he would choose to fight or leave. Elira, standing behind Jackson, said nothing. She was waiting, just as he was, for the alien's next move. After what felt like an eternity, the alien let out a heavy sigh. This isn't over, he said, his voice carrying a mix of resignation and defiance. But for now, I'll leave you both. Don't think this is the end. With that, he turned and began to retreat, his heavy footsteps crunching against the forest floor as he disappeared into the shadows. Elira let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Jackson remained silent, his eyes still scanning the area for any signs of danger. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, they had won a small victory. Elira stepped closer to Jackson, her eyes meeting his. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. Jackson nodded. We're not done yet, but we got a chance. They stood there for a long moment, the weight of the situation still hanging over them, but the bond between them stronger than ever. There was no turning back now. Together, they would face whatever came next. The forest had become quiet again, but the stillness felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. No, there was a sense of unease lingering in the air, as if the ground itself held its breath. Jackson and Elira stood together in the clearing, watching the shadows stretch across the forest floor as the alien disappeared into the trees. The threat wasn't gone, not entirely, but for the moment, they had gained a small victory. Jackson's eyes stayed focused on the path where the alien had left, his hand still resting near his blaster. He was waiting, unsure if the situation was truly over. He didn't trust that the alien would give up easily, but for now, there was nothing more to do but move forward. Is he gone? Elira's voice broke the silence, her tone almost fragile. Jackson turned to her, his gaze softening. Elira had been through so much already, and though she tried to hide it, the fear was still there. It was in the way she stood, the way she looked at him, as if she expected the worst. But there was something else in her eyes too, something stronger. Determination. He's gone for now, Jackson said, though he knew better than to say it was over. But we can't let our guard down. Elira nodded, though she didn't seem convinced. She stepped away from him, her feet moving cautiously over the uneven ground. Jackson watched her, knowing that this moment, this pause, was important. They had both survived the encounter, but it wasn't just about fighting the alien or winning small battles. This was about something much bigger. It was about trust, about finding strength in one another when the world felt uncertain. I don't know what to do next, Elira admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She was looking at the ground, her steps slow, her body language tense. I've been running for so long. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Jackson took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the trees again. This wasn't the time for promises. He couldn't guarantee anything, but he could stand beside her. That was something he could do. You don't have to keep running, Jackson said. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to do it alone. Elira paused, her head tilting slightly as she looked at him. There was something about the way he said it, something in his voice that made her heart flutter. She had never been allowed to trust anyone. Not like this. She had always been taught to keep her distance, to keep secrets, to remain silent. But Jackson's words, they made her think that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to build something new. Together, she repeated softly, almost as if tasting the word for the first time. She took a step closer to him. You mean it, don't you? Jackson smiled, though it wasn't the usual confident grin. It was softer, more sincere. I do. The silence between them was comfortable now, not tense like before. They didn't need to say more. It wasn't about promises they couldn't keep, but about showing each other that they weren't alone. Elira wasn't just a spy anymore, not just a stranger from another world. She was someone he could understand, someone who had a future just as uncertain as his own. And for the first time in a long time, Jackson didn't feel so alone either. I've spent so much time thinking about survival, Elira's aid, her voice steady now. I never really thought about what comes after, but maybe it's time I started. Jackson glanced at her, his heart warming at her words. I think we both need to think about what happens next. A few minutes passed, and they continued to walk, side by side. The forest seemed to open up as they moved, the trees thinning and giving way to a small, peaceful meadow. For a moment, Jackson almost forgot about the danger. It was just him and Elira, alone in this strange world, with nothing but the quiet hum of nature around them. But even in the calm, Jackson knew better than to relax completely. The moment the alien had left, a new chapter had begun for them both. But it was one full of uncertainty, full of challenges. He didn't know what would come next, what the future held for them. But for the first time, the path forward didn't seem so dark. We'll need to get to a safer place, Jackson said, looking around. A place where we can plan. We can't keep moving through the forest like this. Elira nodded, her eyes scanning the meadow. I know a place, she said, her voice more confident now. It's not far from here. A hidden base where I can contact others, if necessary. It's a place where we can stay for a while. Jackson turned to her, sensing a shift in her demeanor. She was no longer the scared spy, running from her past. She was Elira, a person with a plan, someone who had something to fight for. And in that moment, Jackson realized that she wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was trying to live, trying to build something new, something better. "Lead the way," Jackson said, a sense of purpose rising within him. They would face the challenges ahead, no matter how difficult, together. As they walked, Jackson couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope for the first time since this mission had begun. The future wasn't clear, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty, but they were walking it together. And for now, that was enough. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs to walk. And in that moment, as they moved through the meadow, Jackson knew that whatever came next, he would face it with Elira by his side.